One of the most frequently asked and debated questions in Rise of Kingdoms concerns who are the best commanders and commander pairs in the game's current meta. Well, in this video, I'm going to give you my take, so stick around. What's up, everybody? Psycho here with another Rise of Kingdoms video. One of the most common questions we see in Rise of Kingdoms concerns commanders, or which commanders I should be using, which commanders should I invest in, which commander pairs are the most meta in today's game. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about the Season of Conquest, the late game commanders, which commanders are the most meta. Now, some other content creators, in fact, I know Chisgold just recently released a video talking about his top 5 commander pairs, or if he was putting together a 5-March murder ball. In this video, I'm going to be doing something similar, and this was a video I had planned to talk about a little bit before I saw that video, but so I'm going to go ahead and continue, and this is really a continuation on the video I made previously talking about which commanders are sort of left behind. I'll leave a card at the top for that video if you want to check that one out. But in this video, I really want to talk about the best commander pairs for each troop type and how you might combine those into either a 5 or a 6 or a 7-March murder ball, depending on what kind of technology you have in the Season of Conquest. So I'm going to start first with infantry as the first one. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to give you what I think is the #1 march for each troop type. And then I'm going to give you what I think are the best 2 marches for each troop type. And I won't get into 3 marches because I personally think that in the current meta, there's no real room for 3 marches of a particular troop type. Now, I think that's not quite true. I do think you could do a 3-march pretty close to optimal meta murder ball with one troop type of cavalry, like 3 troops cavalry or 3 marches cavalry. I think you could do the same thing with archers. I don't really think you can get away with a 3-troop meta infantry type, but I think there's some loose ways you could do it with with cavalry and archers, but I don't think you can do it with infantry. So I'm going to stick with this notion of you're going to put together what are the 2 best marches of each troop type available in today's game. So let's get started with infantry, and I think this one's a really obvious one. Guan Yu is one of the best commanders in the game, and he's probably either the best or the 2nd best infantry commander in the game right now. And so he's obviously one of those that you're going to want in your #1 march. And the #2 is the other #1 or #2 infantry commander in the game right now, which is Scipio Africanus or Scipio Prime. These two together, Guan with Scipio, they have a ton of synergy. Lots of discussion of that. Everybody sort of knows this. So Guan, Scipio, if you're only going to run 1 infantry march, this is the premier infantry march out there. And so if you're going to run 1 march, this is the one to do. Now, the thing is, though, when we start talking about 2 marches and these things start to get broken up, how does that play out? Or do we keep this march together? Do we add a 2nd infantry march? And this is something I've talked about for a long time. I've made a couple of different videos where I've talked about the Alex problem or the Leo problem. And I think Scipio Africanus solved that problem. And I did a whole video recently about Leonidas and whether or not he's still a good investment. And I'll put a card at the top for that video. But I think the reason he's a good investment, because if you are going to get to 2 infantry marches, so we've already got our #1 infantry march, that's Guan with Scipio. But if we're going to run 2 infantry marches in our murder ball, I think the best 2 infantry marches, the 2 meta infantry marches right now are, again, Guan Yu, who we've already seen, with Leonidas, who just makes such a really good pair for Guan. There's Leo here, mostly because of the 2nd skill. The 2nd skill increases the probability. Well, actually, it guarantees that Guan will fire 1 turn sooner than he would if he did not have Leonidas. If Guan has Scipio or if Guan has Alex behind him, he will not fire as fast as he will when he has Leonidas behind him as the secondary commander. Leonidas ensures he fires 1 turn faster, which is really, really important because Guan's first skill does silence. And when you get to silence the enemy before they can hit you, that gives you a really powerful edge early on in the fight. So Guan Leo is that first march. But of course, Scipio is not going away. Scipio is going to stay in this top 2 commander pair. And I don't know if I would really put Guan Leo #1 and Alex Scipio, and that's going to be the other pair here is Alex with Scipio, as the #2 pair. And that's actually what I run. I actually run Guan with Leo and I run Alex with Scipio. I don't know if they're 1-2 or 2-1 or how you would order them, but I think that is these are the two best infantry pairs right now: Guan with Leonidas, Scipio with Alex, or Alex with Scipio. Now, a lot of people ask me, which way would you pair them? Would you pair Alex as the primary or Scipio as the primary? I think there's really good arguments for both. One of the real good arguments for Scipio is the primary is the fact that he does an AOE damage on his first skill, and he reduces their health, right? So he has the AOE damage, and you want that to go usually early. Like the sooner you can hit somebody with an AOE damage, what you don't want to end up in is a situation where Scipio doesn't get to fire off his skill. So maybe a typical March might fire off on turn maybe 10, or maybe the secondary commander might not fire off until turn 12 in a fight. So you don't want to be in a situation where you don't get to fire off the skill, because it does do AoE, it does a big damage factor, and it does have a health reduction effect, and that's a really good reason to use Scipio as the primary. The other good reason to use Scipio as the primary is because he has the support tree, which most people like. This is the tree I actually use when I am running Scipio as a primary. I'm not really sure it's the best one, but I haven't been running Scipio as a primary recently, and I'm about to tell you why. I actually prefer the opposite combination, which is Alex as the primary. And again, I think both are very defensible. Both are very reasonable ways to go. I prefer Alex as the primary because his first skill, when expertised, has this big debuff where it actually it increases the damage taken by 3 enemy troops for 4 seconds by 30%. That's a lot of extra damage that those troops are taking. And so I actually like the idea of Alex's debuff going off first, so that all of my other marches are benefiting from that debuff, but also Scipio is guaranteed to benefit from that debuff when he hits them with his big AoE. So we get the big debuff, then the AoE hits. So that's the combination that I like. Alex does not have quite as good of a tree. He has the attack tree, which I think is a little underrated. I think it's still actually pretty good, but I put most of the points in the infantry tree. I go out here and I get effortless, and I put all these points in fight to the death because I just like more damage. I'm here to get kills. I don't really care if I take more damage. I want to be putting out as much damage as I can. So this is the tree that I use for Alex. So those are the combinations that I use, and I think those are the best 2 infantry pairs right now. If you're going to run 2 infantry pairs in your murder ball, it's Guan with Leo, and it's Alex with Scipio, or Scipio with Alex. Okay, moving on to cavalry. I think most people would say the #1 cavalry pair right now begins with XY as the primary commander, and that is backed up by Alexander Nevsky. Nevsky is just so powerful. I've made a whole bunch of videos on this channel about Nevsky and just how strong he is and how many different combinations he can be used. When he first came to the game, he was just such a game-changing, next-level commander. And now Scipio and Boudica Prime have come on, and those commanders have sort of equaled him at that level, but the point here is that if you're going to bring in 1 cavalry march, XY with Nevsky is really the one to bring. The damage per second that this march does is amazing, mostly because XY has a rage reduction requirement here on his 4th skill, and his rage actually only has a 900 rage requirement to begin with just to fire off his active skill. So 850 rage requirement, and you're doing 1700 AoE damage, plus a massive single target damage factor here from Nevsky at 2300 to a single target. Both of them are reducing the defense, so you're going to get a defense reduction on the target. Tons of stats from Nevsky, which are really cool, and a bunch of skill damage bonus. And again, XY firing off skills with AoE and skill damage boost, and then you've got Nevsky firing off a big skill. Just a really powerful march in the open field for cavalry players. It's really the #1 cavalry march in my opinion. Now, what if we have to go to 2 marches though? And this is another case where we are going to be splitting that march up. Even though it's really powerful together, when we can split them up, the marches become, I think, in my opinion, even more powerful. So if I'm going to bring 2 cavalry marches to the field, the first march, and again, this is not really a particular order. I'm not really saying this is march #1 and that's march #2, but the first march I would bring is XY, again, as the primary. But in this case, I would bring him with Honda as the secondary. And I know I'm cheating a little bit because Honda is not a cavalry commander. And we'll come back into that in a little bit here, but he is a leadership commander, but this pair works out really well. First of all, Honda also has AoE damage, so firing off those skills faster with XY means more AoE, more AoE, more AoE. It's not a huge damage factor, but it's plenty big enough when we're talking about AoE damage here. So that's really good. He gives a lot of stats, particularly the march speed, which XY can really use. use. That's really helpful for him as well. He has some damage taken reduction effects, which are actually pretty cool. And he does some march speed reduction to targets as well. So, and then he has some troop capacity, which again gives XY more damage and more tankiness because you have both. And he has this kind of cool thing where he accelerates the skill damage. And again, because you're doing lots of skills with XY, accelerating that skill damage is really valuable. And then finally, this is why you really must expertise Honda. He gives XY a lot more tankiness, which he really needs here by taking less normal attack damage, 30% less normal attack damage for the first 57 turns, basically, of a fight. And you go back to your city, that all resets. So XY Honda, a very common pair, really excellent cavalry pair. I think the second cavalry pair, of course, we are going to be including Nevsky. This time we're going to be using Nevsky as the primary commander in this case. And the secondary commander we're going to be using with him is another just amazingly awesome, I think, cavalry commander, and that is William the First, or William the Conqueror. William, the reason he pairs so well with Nevsky is a couple of reasons. One is William doesn't have much tankiness at all. He's basically all attack, all damage. Nevsky has a lot of stats. He's got health stats. He's got defense. I mean, he just kind of does everything. And of course, they both do a lot of skill damage, right? So, and Nevsky boosts skill damage, and William does skill damage. He does AoE. It's a weird AoE, but he does do skill damage. He reduces the march speed of the target so they can't get away. Again, here he has a lot of attack. He does a lot of, he's just, when he's outside of Alliance territory, he increases damage again by a higher percentage. Again, more stat bonuses here, and he's got a really cool surround bonus, which is something that Nevsky also has. So when you're talking about a murder ball, you get surround damage from Nevsky, you get surround damage from William the First here as well. And then finally, he buffs all of your other marches. When he hits 2 targets, he starts adding rage to your other marches, which is really cool. He adds rage to his own march, which is great. And of course, he gives himself some defense bonus, which is actually really valuable. In Lost Canyon, people will talk a lot about having William in their murder ball in Lost Canyon because of this powerful buff here. And when you get the expertise, which I eventually will on William, you actually do more damage to those surrounded targets, which is really cool. So the XY Nevsky really works well when you're surrounding things. If you're swarming flags, I said XY Nevsky, but I mean Nevsky William works really well when you're surrounding targets or surrounding flags. So the 2 cavalry marches, if you're going to bring 2 cavalry marches to the field, in my opinion, XY plus Honda and Nevsky plus William. Now let's jump over to archers and talk about what are the number 1 archer, or what is the number 1 archer march in the game right now. Until recently, it would have been Nebuchadnezzar with YSG, but I think with the coming of Boudica Prime, she has really taken the mantle as that top archer commander in the game. You can see that I haven't expertised her yet. I will be expertising her pretty soon, as we'll see if some more wheels come around and I can spin some more for her before I put any universals into her. But the damage factor on her first skill is really strong, much like Nevsky's. It's a very big damage factor. She also increases the skill damage that the target takes, reduces their march speed, just really powerful on the first skill. She gives a whole bunch of stats, including march speed. And then she has some skill damage taken reduction. I mean, she's and some chances to actually increase the normal attack damage that she does. It's just extra damage to infantry and a little bit of healing, which is really probably not that useful. And then there's this one right here, which is really cool. She has a 80% chance to dispel any kind of control effects, any kind of effects that are making her perform worse, and doing 10% more damage. So Boudica is just a really strong commander as a primary commander, and so I think the best pair with her, there's actually sort of an argument for 2. One would be Boudica with Nebuchadnezzar. The other would be Boudica with YSG. I'm going to go ahead and say Boudica with YSG. I just like the bigger area of effect damage that you get, up to 5 targets rather than only 3 with Nebuchadnezzar. So with YSG, you get the 5 targets, you get a pretty high damage factor, and there's all the skill damage bonus that YSG offers too. Plus this bonus here is actually really crazy when it triggers. Obviously, you're increasing the rage, but you're also increasing your attack by 100%, which is like actually a ton more attack and a ton more damage. So I'm going to say Boudica YSG is the number 1 archer march. If you're only going to bring 1 archer march to the field, that is the one to bring. But again, if we can bring 2 archer marches to the field, and for a long time I have run Nebu with YSG, which is going to be one of the marches I would recommend. If you can only bring 2 archer marches to the field, Nebuchadnezzar is just really, really great in the open field. Of course, he's been a rally commander for a long time as well, but look, he does AoE damage up to 5 targets, like YSG does 5 targets. It's a little lower damage factor, and it's not quite the circle AoE, but it's still really quite good. And he does some additional damage to the current target. That's when you get that expertise. Gives you some march speed, which is really nice in the open field. A little bit of tankiness with the defense. This skill doesn't really apply in the open field, but then yeah, just actually just straight up more damage that he does, and some chance to reduce the rage, sort of like a powerful silent trial effect kind of here on Nebuchadnezzar as well. So Nebu with YSG, a really, really good march. It's been a good march for a while, and I will continue to use that march. So I'm going to say that's one of the top 2 archer marches right now. Then the other march, of course, is going to be, and it's going to include Boudica Prime, but in this case, I'm actually going to put Artemisia as the primary commander. There's a really nice synergy between those two. If I can find my Artemisia, I think she's pretty far down here. There we are. Artemisia with Boudica is a really, really nice combination. You get AoE damage from Artemisia, which is, of course, something that I love. You get a lot of stats, defense and health. That's stats that Boudica could really use. She doesn't have so many stats in that department, so that's really good. And then, of course, the big thing that you get here is this here, where she can silence herself but increase her damage for the next 5 seconds by 25%, which is really crazy, especially if Boudica Prime is firing off that big nuke right behind her. And because Boudica Prime also with the expertise has an 80% chance of dispelling that basically means, or 90% chance rather of dispelling that basically means in many cases you actually get that bonus without any downside at all. So Boudica with Artemisia is really powerful. Artemisia is the primary. You also get the defense tree with Artemisia and the archer tree, of course, as the talent trees that you'll use in the open field. So if you're going to use 2 archer marches in the current meta, I say the two best archer marches you can bring to the field right now are Nebuchadnezzar with YSG and Artemisia with Boudica. Now, obviously, I don't have Artemisia in a position to bring her to the field. So what am I personally going to probably be doing? I'm probably going to actually be breaking up Nebu with YSG, putting Nebuchadnezzar with probably Tamira, since I have her expertise. That seems like a reasonable choice. She is an archer commander, brings some nice archer stats, and of course she brings this really powerful debuff, which is just going to supercharge the skill damage that I'm doing to any target. So Nebuchadnezzar with Tamiris, and then that would be Boudica with YSG as the other pair. So that's what I think are the best 2 archer marches right now in the game, Nebu with YSG and Artemisia with Boudica. Okay, so that leaves us down to leadership. So we've got six troops out there already, right? If you want to think of it that way, we've got Guan with Leo, we've got Alex with Scipio, we've got XY Honda, we've got Nevsky William, we've got Artemisia with Boudica, and we've got Nebu with YSG. That would be 6 marches that I think if you were going to bring 6 marches to the field, there's a pretty strong case that maybe that's the best 6, but there's one other march that we haven't talked about, which really comes from the leadership tree. Now, I'll say one thing, is that if I'm talking about leadership commanders and I can only bring one march that includes leadership commanders, it would be a march that included Honda. So the number 1 leadership commander out there today is Honda. I think you can run Scipio with Honda, you can run XY with Honda, you can run just about anybody in front of Honda, and it's going to be very, very powerful. You can run Boudica with Honda. So Honda is a really great secondary commander. So if we're talking about leadership commanders, we're talking about the number 1 leadership march to bring. It's something with Honda almost certainly. But if we're getting into a second march that is in the leadership tree, that's when I think we see that Trajan is really the commander there, and that's who we'll be talking about here. So Trajan, I think, is that 7th march. If we're talking about a 7-march murder ball, and we've got those 6 that I've already mentioned, now we're looking at Trajan as the primary commander on that 7th march, and that's going to be backed up with an Ethelflaed secondary. Why do we like Trajan? Trajan is probably one of the best support commanders in the game. He increases the rage of your allied target or your allied troops. He also increases the damage that that the target takes. Where is that one here? Here it is. Yes, it's this one here where the target will take an extra 20% damage for 3 seconds. Again, you can start, and because this is a passive skill, you can actually combine it with Alexander's great skill. Alexander has 30% damage taken, 20, that's taking 50% more damage, plus all the skill damage extra that it's taking from people like Boudica. I mean, this is just a really good complement to your Murderball. He has a lot of tankiness with this skill. And again, the big thing is that he adds a bunch of a rage to all of your to 3 of your, what was it, 3? I forget exactly how many. Maybe it's 5 nearby. I forget exactly how many marches get that extra rage per second. But of course, those marches also do an extra skill damage. And again, all of our other marches are doing skill damage. So Trajan is just a really, really powerful support march to add, and we'll be pairing him with who's, I mean, the most logical pair for Trajan is one I've been using for a while, is Ethelfled. She has AoE, which of course you know I like. She also takes less counterattack damage, so which is kind of interesting because if they don't focus down your Trajan, basically you can sit there forever because it's not taking as much counterattack damage, and Trajan's already very tanky just to begin with. They actually kind of wreck cavalry marches, which is kind of cool. That skill doesn't really apply, and that skill doesn't really apply too much either, except for the attack bonus because we do have mixed troops. But the other big thing is that it reduces the attack, defense, and health of the target marches that it hits with that 5 target fan-shaped AoE. So for me, that's the 7th march. That is the leadership march that I'll be bringing. And I've called it the 7th march. I'm not necessarily sure I would do that, right? If I was going to be putting together a 5-march Murderball, I think I would actually want Trajan and Ethelfled to be in that Murderball. So I would probably actually do something like, instead of taking 2 infantry marches, I would probably just bring 1 infantry march to that Murderball. That would be Guan plus Scipio. I would bring both of my cavalry marches. That is, I would bring XY plus Honda. I would bring Nevsky plus William. I would bring this Trajan with Ethelfled as my support march, and for my archer march, I would bring Boudica with YSG as my archer march. That would be my 5-march Murderball if I was, you know, in KVK right now, and I could only break 5 marches to the field. I think those are the 5 best you could bring right now to do the maximum effect in the field. Now, if you get that Season of Conquest technology and you get up to a 6th march, I would still keep Trajan and Ethelfled as one of those marches. The march I would add to those 5, right? So we've got Guan and Scipio, we've got XY with Honda, we've got Nevsky with William, and I would break up my my archer march, and I would bring the Artemisia with Boudica and the Nebu with YSG to round out my 6th march. And it's only when I get to that 7th march that I would actually break up that infantry pair, or break up Guan and Scipio, and I would go Guan plus Leo and Alex plus Scipio. So that's the way I see the meta marches right now in Rise of Kingdoms. I think those are the best 7 you can really put together. Again, you can make a case and say, well, you know, I really want to run 3 archer marches, and there's ways that you could work in, like I said, Tamiris, you could work in a commander like a Ramses, maybe a Gilgamesh. Not as crazy about them in the open field. You could work in a commander like a Saladin. You can even work in a Minamoto in some open field situations if you want to bring a 3rd cavalry march. But I really think right now in the current meta, the way to go is these 2 marches for each troop type. So for infantry, we're talking about Guan and Leo. We're talking about Alex and Scipio, or Scipio and Alex. For cavalry, we're talking about XY with Honda and Nevsky with William. For archers, we're talking about Artemisia with Boudica and Nebu with YSG. And for leadership, we are looking at that support march of Trajan and Ethelfled. Another commander I haven't mentioned much is a Manitore. Of course, you can run Artemisia with a Manitore if you're trying to add that 3rd archer march. But again, I really think that the 2 per group, per troop type, 2 infantry, 2 cavalry, 2 archers with this 1 leadership support march is the way to go in the current meta. Now, of course, we're going to be getting new leadership commanders. We expect to hear about new leadership commanders any day now. And that might change things up quite a bit, but this is what I think the best marches are right now in the game. And if you were entering the Season of Conquest, these are the marches that I would be working towards. Look, if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed this content, give this video a like. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all in the next one.